So I came across an article a couple of days ago entitled, "Autism is a Disability, Not an Identity." Articles like this kind of get a lot of people really divisive really quickly as to whether or not someone who is autistic can take on the label as a part of their identity and not just as a medical diagnosis. And this article in general got me kind of thinking. I wanted to read the article and respond to it to show people why people want to identify as autistic and why the identity is so important to so many people. And also to kind of break down this false dichotomy of it being a disability and being an identity at the same time. Actually, even more disturbing than the title is actually the subtitle of this article, which is "The Neurodiversity Movement Trivializes What Can Be a Life-Denying Disorder." Before I even crack into this article, let me start here. I am autistic. I have been bullied most of my childhood. To this day, I do not have many close friends. I have a hard time forming and understanding meaningful relationships. I have hurt people, and many people have simply walked out on me. I don't communicate well. I scream when I don't get my way, and I still have meltdowns. I have a tendency to run out of rooms whenever things get heated. Yes, I know how hard it is to be autistic, but none of me being autistic denies me life. You cannot tell me that autism denies me life when I'm standing right before you, fully alive. More alive than many people I've ever met. What the neurodiversity movement asks for is increased awareness and accessibility of resources for many people across the spectrum. Therapies that can actually help autistic people work with their brains and learn meaningful skills. The Autism Self-Advocacy seeks to work with therapy providers to teach them how to work with autistic people and teach them how their brains work so that they can actually help them to learn these skills and learn and live better, more productive lives rather than, just teaching the kid to sit up straight and look someone in the eye when they're talking to them. We have people from all across the spectrum supporting neurodiversity. This is not just high-functioning people who do not know what it's like to be able to not take care of yourself. It is, hey, let's get more iPads and communicative devices in schools. It is, let the kid wear the goddamn noise-canceling headphones in class. It is, let's help this person to succeed their way rather than focusing on making them look normal first. I support respite care. I support parents lashing out because they are having a bad day. I support the little 3-year-old sitting in the corner rocking back and forth in the very loud and bright room where 20 people are all talking and he can't focus on a single sound. I support you saying that autism can be debilitating at times. Me being cured tomorrow would not give me my life back. Curing someone who has been nonverbal for 30 years would likely confuse them more than help them. So with that being said, let's jump into this article. There once was a time when the term autism actually meant something. Now it seems as if every other person self-identifies as being at least somewhere on the spectrum. Many attribute their autism to a slightly obsessive or nerdy interest or a degree of social awkwardness. Either way, autism as a diagnostic label has been relentlessly trivialized. Autism has to many become one facet of neurodiversity as simply a different way of being rather than the profound disability it really is. First, coming from someone who still struggles with the concept of disability when applying it to myself, for many people, yet, autism is a disability that causes them to struggle every day. But for many, it gives them amazing abilities in, say, math and science, and in memory and pattern seeking. It gives them skills in art or a love of reading and an ability to connect with characters. Some autistic people report having a strong connection with animals that they would not change for the world. It impacts how we think and how we see everything around us. For some, it gives them a different perspective that they would not change for anything. Yes, everyone is a little awkward and everyone has their quirks from time to time. That does not make someone autistic. What I like to do in my research or in my day-to-day life is look at where we draw the line. What is enough to call someone autistic? And within a medical context, how does whatever is going on in a person's brain impact their daily life? You could have two people who consume the same amount of alcohol day in and day out, but one could be an alcoholic and one could not be, because their consumption of alcohol is impacting their ability to keep a job, go to bed at night, and keep friends and keep normal relationships and keep a roof over their head, for example. On a more personal basis, autism is a spectrum, but on top of that, there is a wider spectrum of variability. Think of it as between autistic and, say, the word allistic and everyone in between. I think many people in the field of autism research would agree with me when I say something like everyone has autistic traits. That is why in the DSM-5 we have things like a threshold. You have to meet X, Y, and Z, and it has to have been present from early childhood. But these traits are present in everyone. Being blind is a different way of being and experiencing the world. It doesn't take away from blindness being a disability. People who claim autism as identity do this because they are tired of people using autism as an insult, or people who say things like vaccines cause autism, or people saying autistic people can't do this or can't do that. They may also identify as autistic or integrate it into their identity because they're tired of being called retarded and just want to be called something that makes sense to them, a title that is actually accurate. Having something as an identity, even if people wrongly self-diagnose themselves, helps to create a community, a support system where other people can share experiences as well as coping techniques and skills to help autistic people do better. Ability of already scarce resources, or take away how hard of a disability to live with autism is. It makes living with it a little easier. It helps create support systems, and it helps a person to feel better about themselves despite their difficulties. Stephen Silverman, the author of Neurotribes, the book was lauded upon its release as an authoritative history of autism, despite its bizarrely sympathetic portrayal of Nazi collaborator Hans Asperger, from whom we get the term Asperger syndrome. Neurotribes is a great book. Please read it. I'll insert my plug right now. Please read the book first. Second, there's no evidence that Hans Asperger was a Nazi sympathizer. Sure, his clinic might have been under Nazi regime. The work that Hans Asperger did was very much an attempt to save these children, show Nazis that they had value as well. Steven Silverman's work is an effort to dig up the history of Hans Asperger, much of which was lost in translation and lost to the so-called Nazi regime to begin with. Hans Asperger wrote about the concept of an autism spectrum 50 years before Simon Baron-Cohen and Lorna Wing. Nazi or not, Hans Asperger's contribution to the field of autism has never been fully appreciated until the last 10-15 years, and he died in 1980. Bringing this to the public eye, Silverman contrasts the description of autism shown in Hans Asperger to that of Kahner's description to show that he had it right almost 70 years before the DSM-5 was even written. He saw the potential in these children that Kahner never did. The book helped to mainstream the neurodiversity movement, which celebrates autism as an identity. A thriving community of neurodivergent people has emerged and is especially vocal online. Silverman spent the better part of 10 years studying and talking to autistic people and why it is so important to them to have an identity. And for many years, they were treated as subhumans and placed in institutions where they were subject to electroshock therapy as a means of control. He worked as his ass off and immersed himself in autism culture and discovered that places like Silicon Valley have become overrun with autistic people. I wonder why. The actually autistic hashtag has become a key identifier for those claiming to be autistic, even though many haven't actually been formally diagnosed as such. Indeed, self-diagnosis is widely accepted and often encouraged within the neurodiversity movement. The neurodiversity movement also promotes the social rather than the medical model. The former is said to be less stigmatizing and more tolerant and inclusive. Self-diagnosis is rampant in many people because my generation and generations before me slipped through the cracks. I was 15 when I realized I was autistic, but I didn't have the relationship with my parents to walk up to them and say, "Hey Mom and Dad, I think I'm autistic. Can I go get an assessment?" Like, what 15-year-old says this? Not to mention, my parents had this image in their brain of autism as the non-verbal, severely handicapped child who is never going to be able to learn or function in normal society and is going to need constant care for the rest of her life. They weren't really ready to reconcile their academically strong daughter being autistic. The neurodiversity movement seeks to help the most people possible and to help people live more positive lives. Feeling good about being autistic helps. Where is the punchline in this article? Seriously, the medical model versus the social model of disability. Amethyst Shaber actually does a very good job of comparing and contrasting these two ideas. I think I would rather go halfway on this. We need both the medical and the social model of disability. We need the medical model to provide medications for people. We need the medical model for research, and we need the medical model for diagnosis. We need the social model to help provide people services in day-to-day living with a condition that presently does not have a cure. It's providing the ramp to the person in the wheelchair, searching for a cure for whatever ails them. We don't stick a person in a wheelchair and it's like, well, the world's completely inaccessible to you, but maybe we'll have a cure in 10 years. That's just ludicrous to think about. Research and throwing money into a cure doesn't help the people who are living with these conditions day to day. So with the current rise in research and the rate of diagnosis, I foresee that the rate of self-diagnosis will probably decrease within the next few generations because more and more people are being diagnosed and being diagnosed correctly. Should we not be more inclusive to people in general? Self-diagnosis in the social model makes autism no less a medical condition and no less a disability. The inevitable result of demedicalizing something as serious as autism is that people start to use the condition in much the same way as transgender identities to achieve a much vaunted victim status, to boost their self-esteem of the needy and narcissistic. When this happens, the true victims of autism become marginalized. Who are the true victims of autism, I ask you? Is autism the scary boogeyman hiding under my bed waiting to steal my brain and make me not normal? I'm not a victim of autism. I am a victim of bullying and abuse and a failing system of corrective therapies and of the medical system that puts a price tag on my health and well-being. My identifying as autistic does not change what is written in the DSM-5. I have also heard enough of autism parents whining that autism stole their child from them like they are some kind of victim. No, you are not entitled to a normal child. Shit happens. We are all different. DSM-5 gender identity disorder was reclassified as gender dysphoria. The rise of people identifying as trans and the destigmatization of trans people doesn't change how debilitating gender dysphoria for these people can be. It also doesn't reduce the amount of therapy and medical hoops that these people have to jump through to receive treatment and make sure that they are trans. Because at the end of the day, you do not want life-altering surgeries when you're not transgender. I am not a fan of victim culture one bit. So you want people to think of me as a victim, but when I say that I'm oppressed, I'm a victim of society, you're like, no, you're not enough of a victim. Autism is a debilitating condition. I own my own shit. Autism does not own me. The sort of autism which entails headbanging, screeching, nappy wearing, and frequent visits to A&E from epilepsy and uncontrollable bouts of aggression is rarely mentioned in the neurodivergent community. Parents of profoundly autistic children who speak about their struggles are routinely rebuked by the new crop of identity-first neurodiversity advocates, often with extremely harsh terms. My sense is that those who have embraced autism as a form of identity do not want the world to know about the other side of this strange, tragic, life-denying condition. I was extremely aggressive as a child. I will not lie to you about that. I threw things. I threw chairs at people. I wasn't much of a headbanger, though, but I bit myself a lot. Nor do I have epilepsy. I think that people in the Identity First movement want autistic parents to know that their child can be happy. Or why specifically they're headbanging, and they want their people to understand why autistic people commit these behaviors and what to do to help them when they are melting down, or to even prevent them from melting down to begin with. They don't seek to sweep these aspects of autism under the rug. They want to give autistic people the tools to take control of their own lives. They want better services that help a person seek relief from headbanging rather than simply punishing the child for doing so. Or the option, for example, to go to a quiet place so that you can melt down in peace and calm down and come back when you're ready. The sense I'm getting from you is that you haven't actually spoken to enough people from the neurodiversity movement or engaged with anybody who is considered low functioning and still embraced the label to really form a proper opinion. You just want to tell me that autism denies me life rather than being so focused on how tragic autism is. Perhaps you shouldn't mock the people who seek to make living with autism a little better for us all. My own life straddles the extremes of the autism spectrum. I am an Aspie, slang for someone with Asperger's syndrome, while my younger sibling is profoundly disabled through autism. Although we share the same label, it is more than apparent to anyone who meets us that we have two very distinct conditions. I am verbally fluent, while my brother can utter only very simple words. I have a full-time job and live independently, while he will require care for the rest of his life. I can prepare basic meals while he struggles to make a piece of toast. We could say the same for anybody with a cancer diagnosis, or with an HIV diagnosis, or with a diagnosis of blindness or deafness or bipolar. This is the concept of a spectrum. The neurodiversity movement seeks to provide services to give people like your brother basic skills, as well as help someone like you with job skills and work and relationships. Maybe your brother would benefit from an assisted care living environment. Well, Asperger's was once diagnosed as a separate condition from autism, but the two were amalgamated in the DSM-5, the authoritative diagnostic tool for psychiatric conditions. This was a huge mistake in my view. Autism is far too broad of a label. The difference between the crowd of people who identify as neurodivergent online, who often present themselves as an autism community, and a barometer of autistic opinion. The type of autistic people you might meet at a special needs school is a stark difference, to say the least. I used to think this way too, especially because I figured out that I had Asperger's when I was 15. DSM-4 was still the diagnostic authority, but I received my AS diagnosis in 2014 under the DSM-5. I felt like I had been robbed, but I chose to embrace a new community because I realized that I have had days where I am non-functional. I used to rock and scream and run away. I still have extremely hard time making friends and keeping up with conversations. That is just who I am. I decided to stop caring about making friends because most people were complete assholes to me and I wouldn't want them as a friend anyway. The funny thing is, Asperger used the word autism to describe his condition. He worked with children from across the entire spectrum, over 200 people, over more than 10 years. I have seen the other side of the spectrum and I know what you are talking about. I also remember myself at my worst days, and I don't see much difference. The core thing that unites autism is the communication difficulties, as well as the fixation on routines. It is the systemizing brain trying to navigate a personable world and floundering. This was done to help everyone get the help they deserve, rather than being swept under the rug because they are too high functioning. In the online sphere, autism and neurodiversity are worn almost like fashion items by people who can often blend imperceptibly into so-called neurotypical population. Stimming, self-stimulating repetitive movements such as flapping and rocking that can be soothing for autistic sufferers is celebrated in the form of stim dances that are uploaded onto YouTube and other social media. Stim dances, for example, are made to show that stimming can be a form of self-expression and communication, a window into the mind of whomever is doing it. I used to tell an ex-partner of mine that when I kick my legs back and forth, bending my legs at the knee, so if I did this with my legs, I was upset or anxious. But when I had my legs straight, that meant I was happy. And it was a form of self-expression. So rather than tell a person, quiet hands, don't do that, recognize that what they are doing is a necessary part of being. Everyone stims if you actually think about it. Like, headbanging during a rock concert is considered acceptable. Again, with the suffering language, when people keep shoving it down my throat that I'm suffering, I am going to throw it back in their face and tell them I'm thriving. Neurodiversity stands as a civil rights issue of our day, according to the self-described neurodiversity scholar John Elder Robinson. For the likes of Robinson, autism is akin to being black in a white-dominated world. Autistic people are being held back not by any disorder, but by a prejudiced society. The prospect of finding a cure for autism is likened to the form of eugenics. Cognitively able autistic speakers regularly extol the virtues of neurodiversity and describe the distinct gifts that autism confers in lengthy essays at large conferences. Meanwhile, many with severe autism languish in their rooms, isolated from the rest of the world, confined largely to a world composed of their own narrow and often infantile interests. My own brother, Angel, he is pushing 30, and yet he spends the majority of his free time watching Thomas the Tank Engine videos on YouTube. He has a diet of chicken nuggets and chips. If we are lucky, he eats baked beans. Who are you to tell somebody that their interests are infantile? They're still his interests. They're still what makes him happy every day. I think you're the one denying him life rather than his autism. Thomas the Tank Engine is great. You should watch it with your brother sometime. We need to stop thinking in normative terms and start meeting people where they are at. Maybe there is a Facebook group for Thomas the Tank Engine lovers where he can immerse himself and he will be happy. Sounds like a great life to me. Ignorance is bliss. Like living... It would be like giving a caveman a cell phone. What the fuck is he supposed to do with this? Absolutely nothing. We are not making life easier for people whose lives were fine to begin with. There are days where I languish in my room, and there are days when I am fully functioning adult. Maybe you shouldn't shame someone for liking something that has been considered beneath their age bracket. I started reading a children's book again because I thought it was cute and interesting. I watched Teletubbies until I was 10. And played with Barbies until I was like 12 or 13. I kind of wish I kept playing with them, actually, in retrospect. I played Magic the Gathering with people who are much younger than me. And I'm kind of bad at it sometimes, but I don't care. I find people in my own way, and these people accept me for who I am. This is an expression. It goes something like this. We don't stop playing because we grow up. We grow up because we stop playing. The disconnect here is obvious, yet people like me who point this out are relentlessly demonized for doing so. In a cult-like manner, the autistics who dissent from neurodiversity script are treated as heretics, subjected to social media witch hunts like Jonathan Mitchell, a longtime opponent of neurodiversity and autistic identity politics, is regularly bombarded with angry phone calls, emails, and death threats. Judith Newman, the author of To Siri with Love, has been dogpiled relentlessly for writing that she once contemplated a vasectomy for her autistic son due to the nature of his disability. She worries he may struggle with the demands of parenthood. I have also been called out by this so-called community for not hating functioning labels and reminding people that these are medical terms and that we can't just describe everybody on the spectrum in a book. I think functioning levels have their place, but they also have their problems. I want to feel successful and I want to feel normal, but I also want to feel like myself, which is hard. I don't actually know who Jonathan Mitchell is, and I do not support death threats, and I cannot speak for anyone on this matter. Judith Newman, on the other hand, shared private information regarding her son's darkest moments to the world without his permission, and wishes to have him sterilized because she thinks he will not be able to handle parenthood. As if she can just tell her son, "You don't get to be a father," when there are far worse people on this planet having children, drug addicts, people who are extremely violent, pedophiles, and you're worried about your autistic kid having issues with parenting. Maybe if he had a better support system to help him be a parent, you wouldn't have a problem. To make that kind of choice for a person, let alone a child. People have the right to their own bodies, period. I think it is good to hear from both sides, and I do not want to silence you. I just want to tell you how the neurodiversity movement has helped someone like me thrive and relearn how to love myself. We want to help everyone on the spectrum, but we also want to meet them where they are rather than compare them to other people in their age group. It is time that society took a more objective view of autism and the suffering it entails. It may be true that some people find solace in accepting and even taking pride in being autistic, but for many who suffer with autism, not to mention their parents and caregivers, this is simply not the case. Autism is first and foremost a disability and not an identity. Someone's suffering is never going to be objective to begin with, so we need to stop right there. It feels like you are setting up a false dichotomy. You have your high-functioning people who can take pride in their diagnosis, and you have the people suffering from autism as a debilitating condition. I say all people all over the spectrum, whether you keep a job and blend in with society or not, can celebrate being autistic. Your brother can celebrate loving Thomas the Tank Engine, and I can celebrate my love of science and patterns. Everyone needs some reason to smile by being autistic. We need to stop thinking about people as being hurt by being autistic and recognize that this is who we are. I never asked to be autistic. Autism is first and foremost is a person, not a disability, not an identity, but in the brain, a way of thinking. 2. Tom Clement. I suggest you educate yourself on the neurodiversity movement, as well as on concepts like systemizing and empathizing. I also think you should engage with your brother more and really understand how he feels. Maybe he would like to identify as autistic and embrace this as part of his identity. No one is saying autism does not present challenges. But telling someone who was born blind how great sight is doesn't help them at all. Making the world more accessible to them does. Something that is common in autism is black and white thinking of things in two extremes. The author creates a false dichotomy between people like himself, the high-functioning people, and those who suffer from autism and have had their life denied by it. Everyone suffers from something. I have never said that I suffer from autism. I am autistic, and autism is a disability. Rather than feel sorry for people who may have more difficulties and claim that their condition is life-denying because they have a hard time taking care of themselves, or they may appear to be mentally behind where their age-matched peers are in life, let's meet them where they are in life now and ask, how can we make your life better? Adopting autism as an identity does not take away from someone's need for support systems, like your brother. It simply says, you know what? Your life's not a tragedy. You're here. Adopting autism as an identity doesn't take away from someone's need for a support system that could help someone like your brother. Telling your brother that his life is tragic because all he does is sit in his room and watch Thomas the Tank Engine doesn't help him either. Actually, neurodiversity as a movement advocates for support systems and therapies that seek to teach people real-life skills. Maybe your brother could benefit from assisted living and job coaching, and maybe you could benefit from a social skills group. If we took away autism as an identity tomorrow, your brother would still be your brother. It feels like the people who won't vaccinate their child because they think vaccines cause autism. When I hear this, I hear that you would rather have a dead child than a child that needs a little extra help. Something being an identity doesn't take away from how hard people's lives are with this condition. It opens the door to a community of support. It lets someone say, no, my life is not tragic. And no matter how hard my life is, it is still my life. And autism did not deny me my life. Your standards of what my life ought to be is what is denying me life. So, something being an identity doesn't take away from it being a disability or how hard someone's life with the condition can be. It instead opens up the door to a community of support, and it lets someone say that their life is not tragic, and no matter how hard my life is, it says autism did not deny me life. There's actually another article that I would like to highlight that does a good job of actually properly characterizing the neurodiversity movement, and I'm going to link it here too. Thank you for your time.